Do you guys find it funny that people like Joy Reid and Jonathan Capehart at MSNBC are getting fired because they just repeat the same old leftist talking points about Trump that a lot of people are tuning out? Now, these are the same talking points that the left have been echoing in their chamber for a decade. And even though people aren't buying it anymore, the entire Democrat Party can't find anything else to talk about but these same old talking points. Trump is a Russian asset, Trump is a dictator, and so on. Their lack of imagination is embarrassing. Also, their lack of understanding is embarrassing too. Right now, the Trump administration, through DOGE, brags that they've cut $55 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse. That's a good thing, but that's less than 1% of the money our federal government spends in a year. But that's somehow enough for someone like leftist economist and political commentator Robert Reich to post this on Facebook. The battle of our day is no longer about Democrats versus Republicans or left versus right. The choice right now is democracy or dictatorship. And we're sliding faster than I ever thought possible into the latter. Everyone must choose which side they're on now. Today, Reich is telling us that from all the stuff he sees going on in this administration, Trump is taking us toward a dictatorship. Now, let's compare that to what Robert Reich was talking about in the Newsweek article he wrote in March of 2016, about 7 months before that presidential election. But Trump has finally reached a point where parallels between his presidential campaign and the fascists of the first half of the 20th century, lurid figures such as Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Oswald Mosley, and Francisco Franco, are too evident to overlook. That's weird. Reich was telling us that Trump might be a dictator before he got elected as number 45 almost a decade ago. It turned out that Trump cut regulations and taxes, which no fascist dictator ever did. He championed free speech, which no fascist dictator ever did. And he appointed judges that gave power back to the states, which no fascist dictator ever did. That was his first term. So what about today? What is he doing that makes him a fascist dictator? He wants to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from how the federal government spends our tax dollars. Not typically what fascist dictators do. He wants to cut 10 regulations for every new regulation that's implemented. Again, not typically what fascist dictators do. He wants to broker a peace deal for a foreign conflict. That's not what fascist dictators typically do. And he wants to take power away from the federal government and give it back to the states. And again, that's not what fascist dictators typically do. You see, they can accuse Trump of being a dictator, but they can't make the case. And why can't they make the case? Because it's Democrats who want the federal government to have more power. It's Democrats who want to censor free speech. It's Democrats who want to do away with our Second Amendment. It's Democrats that have political desires that are more in line with fascism. And now the power that Democrats have pulled into the executive branch is not being wielded in a fashion they like. So it must be because Trump is a dictator. It doesn't matter that the power of the executive branch is being wielded to reduce the control that the federal government has over us, or that it's used to cut spending and red tape. He's a dictator who thinks his government should have less power over the people. That accusation just doesn't make any sense. Democrats, like the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, say that Trump's actions are good for the bad players in the world like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. But when Rice was working in the Obama administration, they flew pallets of cash to Iran. Then Trump's policies of sanctions had Iran broke and scrambling. But then Biden reversed those policies and they got rich again. And what happened? They spent millions of dollars to attack one of our closest allies, Israel. But we're supposed to believe that Trump is emboldening our enemies. Trump wants a peace deal to stop the Ukraine-Russian war, and because the best chance for a peace deal is for Ukraine to give up territory that Russia has already taken, they tell us Trump must be a Russian asset, which is completely absurd. It's also absurd to think that Russia will agree to a ceasefire without keeping those areas. So the choice is between a forever war that we pay for, or the total annihilation of Ukraine, or peace. I find it ironic that the American president who chooses peace is somehow a Russian asset, but the president who removed sanctions that allowed Russia to finish building Nord Stream 2, a pipeline that Ukraine was adamantly against, and that politicians in both parties had an issue with, is nothing like a Russian asset. Here's what the top-ranking House Republican on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, said about that decision back then. It is a Russian malign influence project that threatens to deepen Europe's energy dependence on Moscow, render Ukraine more vulnerable to Russian aggression, and provide billions of dollars to Putin's coffers. But we're supposed to believe that the president who backed the sanctions to stop the pipeline is friendly to Putin. Or what about China? Are they emboldened by a president who sticks it to them with tariffs? Or are they emboldened by a president whose family members made so-called business deals with Communist Party-connected companies for millions of dollars with no services rendered? And what about North Korea? In Trump's first term, he opened up talks to start the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Under the last Democrat president, Kim Jong-un sent thousands of North Korean soldiers to join Russia against Ukraine. Look, what's really going on is that swampy Democrats and some Republicans are afraid that the gravy train might be coming to an end, and that some of them might get caught up in scandal when money trails are investigated. What DOGE is doing is an audit. They're trying to figure out where all of our money is being spent. Are we paying useless workers to do nothing? Are we giving organizations money for nothing? Is the money even going where it's said to be going? Now you tell me, who would be against finding out how our hard-earned tax dollars are being spent? Honest politicians and civil servants working hard to do right by our citizens? Or people who don't want the public to know how they've gotten so filthy rich on a salary of $175,000 a year? Even though the attacks on Donald Trump aren't as effective this time around, they are nastier because Trump learned a valuable lesson during his first term. He learned who he can and can't trust. And this time, Trump has put together a team that's actually willing to drain the swamp. And that's the simple truth. Hey guys, thanks for watching. And if you all want to support this channel, check out the links in the description, and let's keep putting some common sense back into the great debate.